A velvet glove, an arsenic smile, and a secret worth 1,000,000 dead men. You think the American Civil War was won on the fields of Gettysburg and Vicksburg. You are only half right. The deadliest battle, the one that decided which flag would fly over the Capitol, was fought in the glittering, smoke-filled drawing rooms of Victorian London, 3,000 miles from the nearest cannon blast. At the center of this shadow war was a woman whose beauty masked the mind of a master strategist, Mrs. Jenny Boscawen. She wasn't an abolitionist or a diplomat. She was an audacious, newly arrived American socialite who possessed the power to charm a prime minister and bankrupt an empire. The Confederacy needed Britain's navy to survive. The Union needed Britain's neutrality to win. This is the astonishing, true story of how a single woman, armed with nothing but champagne and carefully planted gossip, outmaneuvered the South's most brilliant spies and secured the financial collapse of the Confederate States of America. Part 1. The London Gambit. Chapter 1. The Debutante and the Blockade. London, autumn 1862. The city was a hive of manufactured indifference. Officially, Great Britain was neutral in the American Civil War. Unofficially, everyone knew that neutrality was a silk curtain drawn across a bonfire. Britain needed Southern cotton for its massive textile mills. The Confederacy needed British warships, specifically the infamous Laird rams, powerful ironclads to break the suffocating naval blockade the Union had imposed. If those rams sailed, Britain would be pulled into the war, the blockade would shatter, and the Confederate States would be unstoppable. The fate of the American Republic hinged on a few thousand words spoken between a handful of lords in Westminster and the tireless lobbying of the South's most senior diplomats, James Murray Mason and John Slidell. Into this volatile political arena stepped Jenny Boscawen. She arrived from New York not as a Union envoy, but as an impossibly wealthy, recently widowed socialite whose sole ambition, she claimed, was to escape the ghastly noise of the colonies and secure a proper English husband. She quickly bought a sprawling townhouse in Mayfair, filled it with the finest silks and gaslight, and commenced her social assault. Jenny was a marvel. Her copper hair, her scandalous Parisian gowns, and her effortless ability to deliver a perfectly phrased insult made her an instant sensation. The press dubbed her the American Duchess, and her balls were the hottest ticket in London, attended by everyone who mattered, the old aristocracy, the new industrial barons, and, most crucially, the cabinet ministers of Lord Palmerston's government. But beneath the diamond choker and the playful banter, Jenny was executing a complex, deeply dangerous strategy orchestrated by Secretary of State William H. Seward in Washington, D.C. Her mission was simple in its goal, devastating in its method: to sever the financial ties between the City of London and the Confederate government. The South's war machine was fueled by its ability to sell bonds to European investors, promising massive returns when the war was won. Jenny had to make those bonds toxic. Her first target was Mr. Basil Hawthorne, the wealthiest and most influential private banker in the city, a man whose word alone could sink a loan agreement. Hawthorne was a staunch, if quiet, believer in the Confederacy. He saw a quick Southern victory as a commercial inevitability. The opportunity came at her own dinner party. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the scent of house gardenias. Hawthorne, a severe man with the face of a granite tombstone, was cornered by Jenny near the library. "Mr. Hawthorne," she murmured, offering him a crystal flute of French champagne, "tell me, as a man of true capital, what is the value of a promise?" Hawthorne, surprised by her directness, adjusted his spectacles. The value, Mrs. Boscawen, lies in the collateral. The Southern bonds are secured by cotton, and cotton, as you know, is king." Jenny took a sip, her eyes never leaving his. King, perhaps, but what if the king is drowning? She paused for maximum effect. She had spent the last week gathering minute details from an informant in the British Admiralty, an old sailor who had grown resentful after being passed over for promotion. These details were the keys to her weapon. You base your valuation on the assumption that the Union blockade is porous, a sieve. You believe the cotton will make it out. Jenny continued, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper that only he could hear. But I have seen the manifests, and I have heard the captains. They are not talking about simple frigates anymore, Mr. Hawthorne. They are talking about the dictator. The name hung in the air. The dictator was not a real ship. It was a revolutionary experimental design for a massive Union ironclad monitor. It was meant to be the ultimate unsinkable blockader. Construction had only just begun in New York, and the British Admiralty had classified all details about this ship.
"Nonsense, Mrs. Boscawen," Hawthorne scoffed, though a tiny flicker of unease crossed his rigid features. "A phantom vessel, a Yankee fabrication." "Is it?" Jenny smiled, the smile that melted diplomats. "A phantom that requires 14-inch solid iron plating, manufactured in a specific, patented process of Sir Reginald Vance's foundry in Glasgow. A foundry, Mr. Hawthorne, that has just received an emergency, highly secret order that is triple the weight of all the Laird rams combined. An order, I might add, that only a U.S. agent, a man named Captain Thaddeus Stone, was authorized to sign off on last Tuesday. And that order, my dear sir, is to be paid in Union gold, up front." She hadn't just fabricated a rumor. She had woven a factual, undeniable thread of truth, the foundry order, into a massive lie, that the order was for a single, terrifying warship already nearing completion. In reality, the order was for smaller, unrelated projects, but the tonnage was real, and the U.S. payment was real. She had weaponized a commercial invoice. Hawthorne's face went white. He wasn't afraid of the dictator. He was afraid of risk. A Union ship of that caliber would make the blockade absolute. If cotton couldn't get out, the Southern bonds, collateralized by that cotton, were worthless paper. "You will excuse me, Mrs. Boscawen," he stammered, putting the champagne down so quickly it sloshed over the rim. "I find I must attend to an urgent matter." Within 48 hours, Basil Hawthorne publicly withdrew his backing for the next Confederate bond issue, citing unforeseen instability in the Atlantic shipping lanes. The news sent a shiver through the city. If the most cautious man in London was pulling out, the Confederacy must be on shaky ground. Jenny had won the first battle by weaponizing industrial manufacturing records and a well-timed glass of champagne. But the South was just getting started. Their next move would be far more dangerous. Chapter 2. The Cipher in the Seamstress's Shop. The withdrawal of Hawthorne's funds stung the Confederacy, but they had a counterpunch. James Murray Mason, the Confederate envoy, was a cagey politician. He realized the battle wouldn't be won in Parliament, but in the streets. He escalated the Southern presence in London, creating a sophisticated espionage network focused on smuggling information and supplies. His new agent was a man named Silas Kent, a disbarred Virginia lawyer with a genius for logistics and an uncanny ability to blend into a crowd. Kent's primary mission was to find out who was funding the Union's counter-propaganda in London. Jenny knew Kent was coming. She used a network of non-traditional spies, waiters, maids, and, most effectively, high-end seamstresses.
London's finest tailors and dressmakers were privy to every secret in the aristocracy, from illicit affairs to financial woes. Her most important contact was Madame Thérèse, a French modiste whose shop, tucked away on Bond Street, was the nerve center of all upper-class gossip. One brisk November evening, while supposedly having a fitting, Jenny was led into Madame Thérèse's back room. Spread on the table was a simple muslin dress, but Madame Thérèse wasn't looking at the stitching. "The American gentleman, the one with the remarkably quiet boots. He visits the tailor on the corner 3 times this week. His request is odd. He demands pockets sewn deep enough to hold a book, but undetectable from the outside." Jenny understood immediately. Silas Kent was not carrying books. He was carrying ledgers, small bound records of the Southern agents, financial transfers, and most importantly, the secret locations of the blockade runners, the swift privately owned ships carrying cotton out and guns back into the Confederacy. These ships were the South's lifeline, and the North needed to know their routes. Jenny formulated a plan for the most delicate form of espionage: seduction and substitution. Kent was known to frequent the Almack's assembly rooms, a notoriously exclusive club. Jenny made sure to be there, looking, as one observer noted, like a goddess who had decided to slum it. She engineered their meeting with theatrical ease, accidentally spilling a glass of port on his waistcoat. Her apology was so charming, so detailed in its remorse, that Kent, despite his training, was instantly disarmed. Over the next 3 weeks, Jenny played the part of the lonely, intrigued American widow to perfection. She showered him with attention, appealing to his Southern chivalry while subtly plying him with information about her fabricated, failing financial investments. The climax came during a private dinner at her Mayfair house. Kent, slightly drunk on French brandy and high on the flattery of a woman he considered far beneath his intellectual league, made a careless mistake. He confessed that he had to leave very early the next morning to Liverpool to meet a certain gentleman about a large transaction. "A large transaction," Jenny mullised, leaning closer, her scent of violet and sandalwood intoxicating. "Money is always so dreadfully heavy to carry, Mr. Kent." "Do you keep it close?" Kent, preening, tapped the side of his coat. "The only things I carry, Mrs. Boscawen, are the things I trust absolutely, in a place where no one would ever think to look." The next morning, while Kent was recovering from his brandy-induced sleep, Jenny's personal footman, a man named Thomas, a former pickpocket she had personally rehabilitated and hired as her most loyal agent, slipped into Kent's room. Thomas didn't go for the safe or the luggage. He went straight for the waistcoat Kent had been wearing the night before, hanging neatly on a valet. With the finesse of a surgeon, Thomas located the hidden, deep-sewn pocket. Inside were 3 leather-bound notebooks filled with Silas Kent's elegant, damning script. The footman did not read them. He had a simpler task. Jenny had meticulously prepared 3 replacement notebooks. They were identical in every way: the leather, the binding, the age. But the contents were subtly, devastatingly different. The replacements contained real data, but with key, minor alterations. Blockade runner schedules. 1 or 2 ship departure times were moved forward by 48 hours. Financial transfers. A major Confederate transfer of gold from a Brussels bank was redirected to a non-existent account in the Bank of Scotland. Agent lists. The name of a key Northern informant in London was replaced with the name of a loyal Southern sympathizer, making the actual spy seem trustworthy. Thomas swapped the books, leaving everything exactly as he found it. When Silas Kent went to Liverpool, he had a successful, productive meeting. He used the false information to direct the Confederate blockade runners along a route that Union warships, having received advance notice of the false schedule, were already preparing to intercept. More critically, the redirection of the gold to the non-existent account would cause a massive public failure in the Confederacy's foreign banking, a collapse that would be blamed not on a Union spy, but on the incompetence of the Southern Treasury. Jenny Boscawen had not just stolen information, she had contaminated the entire wellspring of the Confederate intelligence network in London, setting off a chain reaction of financial and military disasters. The war was officially still far away, but for the Confederacy in Europe, the first signs of a fatal internal rot had begun. Proposal for continued narrative development, to reach 20,000+ words. The opening chapters set the stage for a compelling, extended narrative focused on the intersection of high finance, espionage, and psychological warfare. Act 2, The Laird Rams and the Diplomatic Duel, approximately 6,000 to 8,000 words. The Shipyard Showdown. The narrative shifts to the Laird shipyards in Liverpool. Jenny has to move beyond gossip and actually impede the construction of the Confederate ironclads. She uses a network of Irish dock workers, sympathetic to the Union due to Britain's neutrality, to organize a strategic, months-long labor slowdown, funded by a secret slush fund of Union gold. The Prime Minister's Dilemma. Jenny must directly influence Lord Palmerston and his cabinet. She uses her social access to leak sensitive and partially fabricated intelligence, detailing how the Confederate use of the rams would lead to an unavoidable, immediate war with the U.S., threatening Britain's valuable Canadian colonies. This is framed not as a moral plea, but as a cold, strategic necessity for British imperial interests. The Final Ultimatum. The chapter climaxes with the dramatic, real-life event where the U.S. Minister to Britain, Charles Francis Adams, delivers his famous ultimatum to the British government. It would be superfluous in me to point out to your lordship that this means war. Jenny's groundwork is what made the threat credible. Act 3. The Collapse of King Cotton. Approximately 8,000 to 10,000 words. The Cotton Crisis. The South tries to force Britain's hand by artificially starving the market of cotton, leading to mass unemployment in the British textile industry. The Confederacy believes this King Cotton diplomacy will force military intervention. The Diversion Strategy. Jenny orchestrates a massive financial and logistical operation to prove that the South is not the world's only cotton source. She secretly funds and facilitates the rapid import of Indian and Egyptian cotton into Britain, flooding the market and stabilizing prices. This proves that the British economy can survive without the South. The bond market disaster. The final climax involves Jenny's ultimate move, using the falsified ledgers from Silas Kent to launch a coordinated short-selling attack on all outstanding Confederate bonds in the London and Amsterdam markets. This maneuver, worthy of a modern Wall Street predator, crashes the value of the Southern currency overnight, effectively cutting off their access to European credit and making any future loan impossible. The South's external financial war is lost. The Forgotten Victory. The epilogue details Jenny's quiet return to America and her erasure from the official record. Her methods, espionage, financial manipulation, and social infiltration, were deemed too unladylike and un-American for the post-war historical narrative. The true architect of the Confederacy's financial defeat becomes a forgotten founder. The ultimate victory, secured not by cannon fire, but by the cold calculations of a woman in a velvet glove.